Nacer's Devotion's pretty sick with VSM. Devour. Yo guys, what is up? Max in our first Descendant video. I hope you enjoyed that little intro. We were having some fun last night with Devour, but I've recently been messing around with both the Afterglow Sniper and the Piercing Light. Today in this video, I want to talk about which one is the overall better sniper rifle, and also give you some build guides and tips for using these sniper rifles. And I also have like a really budget Sharen build to show you guys. So I hope you all enjoyed the video. Let's get right into it. So real quick, I just started playing Sharen, and I put together like the world's most budget build on her. We have 0 energy activators and 0 catalysts. Obviously, this is an incredibly glass cannon setup, and you wouldn't like obviously you'd want to invest more into this and like level up overcharged edge and put some health and defense on, but the setup that I just put together like real fast gives her unbelievably short cooldown. The tube ability, my C, is my stealth. That's what's giving me the big damage, just to like give you an idea of how fast this is off cooldown. There's the shot, and we can basically stealth for every single one of our shots that we're doing with our sniper rifle. It is incredibly fast cooldown, and that's kind of what I wanted to do with her. Obviously, I will probably have like a full Sharen build guide, but basically what I did is I put on MP conversion, which gives us skill cooldown, and then I put on nimble fingers, which gives us more skill cooldown. Then I put on multi-talented. Multi-talented reads that whenever we use a dimension skill, we get 20% cooldown. Our invisibility is a dimension skill, so every time we click this, we're getting 20% cooldown, which is even more insane. And then I put on Shot Focus, which is a mod that you can trade purple cerulean mods for. You can only get it by combining. I combined 4 purple cerulean Descendant modules. It took me about 3 days of combining to get this, so definitely took a really long time, but it's just another 15% more firearm attack, and we lose skill damage, but that doesn't affect our camouflage. Skill damage doesn't affect our camouflage damage or our ambush damage, so losing some skill damage doesn't really matter there. It's just more damage for our sniper rifles. And lastly, I've been using the Transcendent module, Overcharged Edge. This reads that it modifies your camouflage to consume shields instead of mana. Ambush damage increases by the amount of shields consumed. Now, currently, this mod is like bugged in a bad way. Whether you have 10,000 shields or whether you have 1 shield, as long as you have shield, you get the same amount of damage bonus. I'm hoping that this is a bug, because obviously it'd be really fun to build out a crazy Sharen build where you're stacking up like a few thousand shield, and then you're just like lining up your sniper rifle, boom, all your shield goes, and the sniper shot does like millions and millions of damage. But right now you can literally not invest into any shield mods and get the same amount of benefit out of this pretty much. But you'll see, so right now if I hover over this skill, I am going to get an outgoing damage increase whenever I leave my stealth, or I shoot during my stealth, of 150% damage, and then I get an additional proportional to lost shield. Once again, it's just any lost shield, and I get another 50%, so I'm getting 200% damage, basically just clicking this button all the time, which is incredibly powerful for sniper rifles, and there's not that much that you need to get this going. The only other thing that I'm rocking right now is just a random reactor with skill cooldown, and we're killing bosses in like, if I wasn't doing 360s, we're killing them in like 10 seconds. So pretty insane. Next up, we get to talk about the sniper rifles. Now, there's the Piercing Light and the Afterglow. Both are really awesome options. If you don't have either yet and you want to use a sniper rifle, the Forest Gaze is the best, like, purple non-legendary sniper rifle in the game. But these Piercing Light and Afterglows are both better than that, in my opinion. Now, I did a little graphic here. You can see the green marks where they have a better stat, and the X marks where they have worse stat. So the Piercing Light has better base damage than the Afterglow, of a big ol' 404 base damage. Obviously, these are like level 1 weapons, so the firearm attack will scale up, but the other stats don't. But Piercing Light has slightly higher damage. The Afterglow has a much higher crit chance, a 50% crit chance versus Piercing Light's 40%. The Afterglow has a 2 times multiplier whenever you hit a crit. The Piercing Light only has a 20% damage increase whenever you hit a crit, and they're pretty close on their weak points. The Piercing Light has a 2 times damage multiplier on weak point damage versus the Afterglow has a 1.8 damage multiplier on weak point damage. One thing to note is the Afterglow also does have a fair bit higher fire rate at 66 rounds per minute versus the Piercing Light's 48 rounds per minute. And now that you've kind of gotten a comparison side to side, I just want to give my impressions after using these things. But before we do that, we just need to show you guys the unique ability. So for the Afterglow's unique ability, you have Nightmare Reaper. Nightmare Reaper allows you to proc Death Propagation, which is a stacking a weak point damage multiplier against bosses, which is fantastic. And you're getting stacks of reload time modifier, which is even nicer for the fact that if we're using Strengthen First Shot, we want to reload and then get more damage. So it works out really well. And also, whenever you're hitting a Colossus, you get percentage increase crit chance. So this thing is just fantastic. And the more you level it up, the more fire rate, the more weak point, the more crit that you're going to be getting. So this is a really good weapon to want to get multiple copies of, and just feels fantastic. Now, the Piercing Light's unique ability, if we go into its details, is called Purification of Light. This will allow you, whenever you hit a boss, you have a chance to proc Dispel, which will remove boss debuffs or boss buffs. So, like, for example, this can be fantastic against Executioner, but its like main core ability is the fact that if you crit or shoot 2 enemies that are lined up, like you hit a collat, you'll get a guaranteed critical hit, and you do a little bit more crit damage. It's very niche kind of ability. It's not useful against Colossuses at all, but it can be kind of fun for mobbing when you line up multiple enemies. But yeah, I think the Piercing Light's unique ability is just strictly worse than the Afterglow for bossing, and that kind of goes to my opinion on these two weapons. The Piercing Light is better for like 1 to 2 shots. You know, if you can crit on those shots will hit harder than the Afterglow. However, the Afterglow, in my test where I did 5 runs with the exact same mods on the Piercing Light and the exact same mods on the Afterglow, my results just felt a lot more consistent against bosses because I'm critting more, I'm getting that buff, the fire rate. It just, in my opinion, is a better feeling weapon. While it might not hit as hard, I think the Afterglow in an extended fight where you're shooting 5 to 10 rounds against a Colossus does win out over the Piercing Light, versus the Piercing Light, if you're only taking 1 to 2 shots, is going to be the better sniper rifle. So it kind of depends up to your personal preference. I do think that the Afterglow is the more worthwhile investment across like all of your characters and any build, because it'll always be useful, versus the Piercing Light is really only good if you're able to take out a boss in like 1 to 2 shots. Just my 2 cents on it. Now let's talk about some builds for the Afterglow. Now, what I have here is like the base mods that you want on this sniper rifle. These are your priorities. You want action and reaction and rifle reinforcement. This is going to give you tons of raw damage. You can either use Strengthen First Shot or Weak Point Expansion. Strengthen First Shot is going to give you a ton of firearm attack damage, 200% after you reload, but it's only for 1 shot. And next up, we get to talk about some builds for the Afterglow. Now, these are the two. Next up, we can talk about some builds for the Afterglow. Now, this is like the core of the sniper rifle. I think these are all of the must-have mods. These are the things that you're going to want to try to polarize and get on your sniper rifle as soon as possible. And you can either use Strengthen First Shot or Weak Point Expansion. They have pros and cons. Strengthen First Shot is obviously going to give you 200% increased damage after you reload on your very first shot. So for the biggest numbers, this is great. I think the more consistent thing is Weak Point Expansion. This is on weak point hit, you get 140% increased weak point damage. This applies to the shot that hits the weak point, so you get 140% weak point damage whenever you hit a weak point. It doesn't require you to reload, and I think this is just a little bit up more often, even though it's a little bit less damage. I think it's a bit more consistent for boss fights, but for the big numbers, you do want to go with Strengthen First Shot. For more consistent damage, you want to go with Weak Point Expansion. Now, the core of the build is to use action and reaction rifle reinforcement for our raw damage. We've got weak point sight for more weak point damage, as well as focus fire for even more weak point damage. Then we've got better concentration for crit damage with concentration priority for even more crit damage. And lastly, better insight for even more critical hit rate. I think this is kind of the core of your sniper rifle build. Everything else is nice quality of life to have. Now, when you're using a sniper rifle, it is really important to use elements. Elements make a big difference for sniper rifle damage. For the Devourer shots, I was using electrical enhancement for another 30% of my damage as electric damage. Obviously, we're doing a lot of attack, so getting a percentage of that attack as an extra element is disgusting. The big issue with elements is they all have different polarity slots, so it's really annoying to try to like build for like multiple elements. So that's why I've left a slot completely open on this sniper rifle. So the way that you can play this with the build that I've set out is if you want to go against, let's say, Frostwalker, you can put on a fire enhancement, and then this slot you can put on extra fire rate, and then you've got a 1 million damage build with fire and fire rate up and all of your the things that you really care about. So this is kind of the way that I've set mine up, and then obviously you can toss in any element you want for extra damage against said bosses. And this feels really good to me. And then obviously I've got this socketed that also fits with electric, so that you can put that there. Now, for big damage, you do want to use these like gun barrel mods. They can make your single numbers look way higher. So like electric gun barrel will give me a ton of electric attack, which is buffing up this, which is really nice for those big numbers. The only thing with these is the fact that, once again, if you want to use some of them, they all have different polarities. So there's not really a way to like min-max them. So you could like min-max the sniper rifle just for like electric damage, and I could show you the craziest like shot on Devour. But in order to make this a flexible build for basically any boss, I've set it up so that you can do that. So you can toss in like extra fire rate, so you can kill bosses a little bit faster. Another thing that you could use here, if you wanted to, if you didn't want to use an element, you didn't want to swap around things, is you can slap on Insight Focus for even more crit hit rate and more crit hit damage for a little bit more consistency. But I do strongly recommend using a element for bosses. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents on it. And then this is the weak point build. The only difference between the weak point build is just use weak point expansion. And this is the big number build that I set up that basically just appeases the DPS algorithm with our focus fire and our fire rate and our inside focus, because elements don't add to it. But yeah, pretty much the same build across the board. The big difference is whether you're using strengthen for shot or weak point. For farming the Afterglow, I strongly recommend going to the Abyssal Void Fusion Reactor in the Fortress Defense Line for 122s. The Synthetic Fiber, I recommend farming either the 071s from the Lumberyard Volga Strategic Outpost or the Kingston Grand Square Fallen Theater Volgas Outpost. For the Nanotube, do it off of the Hard Executioner Magister's Lab. Takes like 3 minutes to run. And for the Blueprint, do it off of the Hard Devour. The Shelter takes about 5 minutes to run. And that is how you get the Afterglow, and that is how you, that is the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you liked this kind of like comparison style video where I talk about multiple legendary weapons and kind of compare them to each other. I was originally just going to make a video on the Afterglow and just make a video on the Piercing Light, but I thought it'd be helpful to see them side by side. So you guys, I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Peace.